As you all know, I love covering Conservative Home. It is it has almost become somewhat of a pet hobby of mine, really, in recent times. And I've explained why I cover Conservative Home so many times, but it's all worth covering. Um, Conservative Home is specifically aimed at conservative audiences, and as such, you get people who write articles for Conservative Home that they will never say anywhere else. And as such, today we get a rare treat because I really get the feeling Will Atkinson, when it comes to who gets, shall we say, priority in writing articles, I think Will Atkinson might be somewhere at the bottom because it always seems to me he gets given the articles that no one else really wants to write or there is no enthusiasm for. And the enthusiasm for, quote, the King's speech has never probably been lower because there is a general election in the next 12 months, possibly even the next 18 months. It's going to be at some point within that duration, but they know it's coming. Sunak has hardly wowed anyone. So we knew there weren't going to be any new policy proposals. But as Chris Brandt said in response to this, I think he was on the BBC, everything that has been announced in this King's speech could be done in about 2 weeks. What it is just fiddling around the edges to make it look like the Conservative government is actually doing something, when in reality, it's really not. And even other Conservatives have really not been that excited. There wasn't a big fanfare or a big, dissection of the King's speech, but this was it on Conservative Home, just one article. One article. Last year, there were at least 2 or 3 in sort of response to, well, shall we say, the Queen's speech, as it was last year. So let's get in and see what was Will Atkinson's reaction to the King's speech, because I'll tell you now, it probably wasn't good. And I will say this now, he seems to be going through somewhat of a conservative midlife crisis, even though he is quite young. So, as always, thank you very much for all the people who do watch the show, watch the channel. Like I say, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Like I say, that costs you nothing, but it does help out the channel quite a bit. If you would like to help support the channel in another way, there are links down below to the Patreon page. There's a Pony Club down below as well. There's the one-off day link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's, of course, the YouTube thank you button as well. And like I say, thank you very much to everyone who does help support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. And of course, do remember to leave a comment down below on what do you think of Will Atkinson's midlife conservative crisis, because he does seem to be going through one on a quite regular basis. But anyway, we'll go diving in to what Will Atkinson had to say about this. So, for the first King's speech in 7 decades, not to star Colin Firth, yes, there's the wit of Will Atkinson there. Legislative ritually underwhelmed. Not in terms of customary pomp and circumstance, but Britain's longest-serving understudy performed his role perfectly. Alex Chalk did an admirable job walking backward in a silly robe and wig. Instead, pardon me, the source of my dismay lay in the speech's content. And it was nothing. This content and what was put out on this was nothing. This may have been, quote, the longest text since 2005, but it contained the fewest bills since 2014. Because they've got no bills. They know that if they the average time for like a proper bill to pass through Parliament is at least 6 to 12 months. And that depends on how big the bill is and what's in the bill. Depends if there's like controversial elements in it. Depends if everyone's in agreement with it or not, whether there are amendments to go into it. So passing a proper bill can be a long time. And the Conservatives know that they do not have any time because they've got within the next year or so, there will be a general election. They do not have time to pass any big bills that would actually make somewhat of a significant difference. So, what do? They, as Chris Brandt said, just tinkering around the edges, that all this stuff that was announced could be done in 2 weeks. So, reviewing Rishi Sunak's legislative program, one becomes aware of a government seriously committed to batting out time, which places its hopes for re-election not in legislative innovation, but crossing its fingers and hoping for an economic recovery. This isn't new, Will. This isn't new. This has been Sunak's plan since day one. His plan to bring down inflation has just been to cross his fingers and hide under the desk and hope inflation goes down. He is, as a lot of people have said, hoping for a miracle that's never going to come. So, or a Labour split. Not going to happen, to be honest, at this point in time. Sunak is pushing back. Sunak's pushing back of the net zero timeline for the phasing out of petrol cars and gas boilers was sensible. No, it wasn't. It was just showed a complete lack of ambition. But the offshore petroleum licensing bill comes across far less a far-sighted decision to improve our energy security and more a sheepish attempt to give Labour a headache for a week or so. One could see it very easily repealed within the first year of Keir Starmer's government. Yep, it probably will. Instead of opening up these new oil and gas things, he could have invested in offshore geothermal, wind power, solar power. There is a ton of alternative renewables Sunak could have gone down. And, pardon me, one of the things I've said is, why didn't he put all that money or another investment into nuclear? Because I've said this before, we do need a nuclear component. If we are to make the transition to green energy, nuclear power is a direction that we should go in. I know people balk at that when I say that, but it is true. All the energy experts do say if we are to do a proper transition to sort of green renewable energy, then that is the direction we must go in. Like it or not, that's what a lot of the experts do say. Similarly, the barring public bodies from conducting boycott, divestments, and sanction campaigns was a 2019 manifesto pledge, but in the current climate, one suspects that it will, depressingly, only become another lightning rod for the opposition's ongoing internal disagreements about the Israel-Hamas conflict. Playing politics with community relations only makes one naturally queasy. Yeah, barring public bodies from that, I don't even think that's going to go down well, because there's so many stuff that could go wrong, not just with the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, but for so many other things as well. So likelihood, it's probably not going to pass, and if it gets to the Lords, the chances are it might not even pass the Lords. It wasn't, of course, the only legislation that seemed to be a likely hangover from an earlier year. The Animal Welfare or the Livestock Exports Bill smacked of the environmental enthusiasm for Mr. May, from Mr. And Mrs. Johnson. Probably, maybe will pass. I suspect it will. But you are right. It does not jive with the current Conservative government. I will agree with you on that, Will. The Football Governance Bill has been mooted for several years, whereas the Rail Reform Bill, only still a draft, so that's not even going to get off the ground at this point, has long struggled to get out of the station. A deputy editor has already lamented the absence of a union connectivity bill. Nevertheless, this is not to say that the King made the journey across from St. James for nothing. Although it stopped short of Michael Gove's ambition of abolishing the entire feudal system, the Leasehold and Freehold Bill was a welcome step in the right direction. Whilst swerving whilst serving the questionable measures of junking Section 21 orders. Similarly, the legislation to smooth over our entry into the CPP is, of course, a long-awaited communication of the work of successive prime ministers. Yeah, wait until that comes into Parliament and all the stuff that, as we've talked about for years, as part of being part of the Pacific Partnership. Because when we're in the EU, we were like this. This is everyone's standards. This is where we all agree, like, the minimum standard is. So you can go higher if you want in your country, but we all agree this is where we want. So we're all aligned on this. The thing with the Pacific Partnership, as we've always talked about, is this is us, this is Malaysia, or this is pretty much almost any other Pacific Partnership country in many of its regulations. We're up here, we're down here. Under those agreements, they can now send goods that are of a lower regulational standard to the UK. And if we block them, if our regulation gets in the way, if we want to make new regulations about that, guess what? Those companies and those governments can sue the government in private courts. How well do you think us being in the Pacific Partnership is going to go down well? Because at the moment, not a lot of people are paying attention to it. But oh boy, when we start to be taken to court, and we will be taken to court because Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, even Malaysia, are already gearing up to do just that because we have a lot higher regulations than what they do in many of those other countries. I'm looking forward to what the Conservative reaction is going to be from all those that we have to do. While some measures, of course, were uncontroversial, after the horrors wrought by Lucy Letbedy, they are going to, of course, disagree with the idea of ensuring that sadistic killers attend their sentencing and spend their lives in prison. But other proposed legislation was, of course, studiously vague. And like I say, that whole thing, yeah, that just smacked to me of, I think, a desperate populist move. Is this a genuine thing that people want? Is it really a good idea to drag her up when she's going to get sentenced anyway, regardless whether she's there or not? It's not really that big an issue, but the government have made it an issue because they want to, seem popular about it. But the other proposed legislation was, of course, very studiously vague. Have ministers really considered the implications of allowing police to enter homes of seized stolen goods without a warrant? Again, I agree with Will on that one. Very, very ill thought out. Of course, it remains to be seen what this legislation will look like in practice. Indeed, much of it will never, of course, be passed. It is, again, right, because there is likely to be, this time next year, we could have had a general election. We will hopefully be in a Labour government, or at least maybe even the early days of a Labour government by this time next year. Most of this stuff is never, ever going to get passed. So if we get that spring election, which seems to live rent-free in the minds of Labour strategists, either way, this was Sunak's opportunity to inform voters of his political priorities before going to the polls. What sort of an impression will he have given? To be honest, not a good one. Not a good one. And I like to say, oh yes, the spring election, which lives rent-free in Labour strategists' minds, it's probably going to happen. Because if you don't have a spring elections, as a lot of people has said, if you have an election in the winter months or even autumn months, guess who doesn't turn out? Old people, more than not. So if the Conservatives do want to stand a chance of winning, a spring or summer election is probably going to be their best chance to try and get their own people out to vote. And that's, of course, if you look at the current polls, they may be not even voting for the Conservatives. So, like I say, wipeout on the way. Either way, where we are. He certainly wouldn't have done this anything to dispel the usual allegations of technocracy. Dimensions of the automated vehicles and machine learning will sit well with the Prime Minister's tech bro image. The decision will also to bar anyone under 14 from being able to buy a cigarette also belays the interventionist Sunak that will hardly improve Sunak's standing with the free market right of the party. Again, it won't. But I also have to ask, how does then that stand with us joining with the Pacific Partnership? Because if you've got a company from the Pacific who now wants to sell cigarettes and says, we should be able to sell cigarettes, your regulations are damaging our profits in your country, guess what? They can sue us. All this stuff and joining the Pacific Partnership, as we've said, brings all these huge problems which conservatives have complained about for years about being in the EU, about all these problems. Everything they have said exists in the Pacific Partnership. I cannot wait. I cannot wait until we have that first case and what the reaction from those free market fundamentalist conservatives would be, who all said how amazing it's going to be joining the Pacific Partnership. So, for all Sunak's talk, of course, taking long-term decisions, this was a King's speech squared aimly and designed to try and keep his party quiet for the next few months. To be honest, even that seems to have failed. He wasn't wowing anyone. And will they keep quiet? No. If anything, they're probably all scheming now about the budget because, as we've said, the budget is going to be a big hurdle. Can Sunak pass his budget? Will there be enough angry conservatives that they go, we are going to make this a vote of confidence issue? We don't want Sunak to continue. We can see how badly he's doing in the polls. He's going to, lead us to disaster. Maybe we should change again. It's not beyond the realms of reasoning that they might actually generally do that again. It's really not. A lot of people said they would never be in the right minds do this. Remember, we've been here before where people were saying the conservatives in their right minds would never do this, and they did. So bear that in mind, where let's say maybe you chuck Sunak, you try to have a quote quick, I doubt it would be, quick leadership contest, and then the Prime Minister gets 6 months in office to try and sort of prove their credentials and prove they're good, and then go into a general election. I see that being generally a thought out conservative plan, and they might generally think about doing that. So, the lack of legislation on nutrient neutrality or conversion therapy, of course, was telling. Convincing Tory MPs to ban dodgy pedicabs, I have no idea, is easier than getting them to agree to build homes or to define a woman. There is a tactical sense to this. Keeping his MPs united and quiet in the run-up to an election does help to minimize Sunak's chance. To quote, I say minimize, help to quote maximize Sunak's chance of winning it. They're not going to keep quiet. They haven't kept quiet for the last 12 months since he's been in power. So the idea that they're just going to sit up and belt up after this and it keeps them quiet, oh no, oh absolutely not. I am hoping that the Green Tories rebel against Sunak. I really hope they get together and rebel against Sunak, because that would be beautiful if they got around and did that. Will they? They haven't so far, but again, it remains to be seen. They are quite a powerful group if they were to combine together. Those around number 10 do often suggest that the Prime Minister would use a full term to address one of the country's major outstanding challenges, such as a social care or undersupply of homes. Blandly today, this might facilitate realism tomorrow. Very much doubt that is going to happen at all. But holding off to achieve something in a future administration, which by all measures currently seems a very distant prospect, leaves ministers open to the charge of inactivity. And it's not just the charge of inactivity, it is inactivity. We have a zombie government in power right now. They are doing nothing effectively. When David Davis stands up and tells the Commons, quote, a winning King's speech would address health, education, and housing, one has to ask why the government isn't already prioritizing them. Because it's got no interest in doing that well. And that should be obvious. Uh, we were promised that when he entered number 10, that Sunak would, on day one, move from claiming MPs to delivering his own, move from calming MPs to delivering his own agenda. And I've written enough articles imploring him to get on the front foot of that. I've even been begging to try and slicken off the cricket metaphors. But the question remains, what is the brighter future Sunak keeps claiming to be aiming for to offer voters? There isn't one. Well, there isn't one. And I'm surprised you are naive enough to think, even after all this year, that he would be able to offer that. He's got nothing. He's got absolutely nothing, Will, to offer. Have you not realized this? Or are you still trying to hang on in the vain hope that Sunak somehow turns around and starts to offer something? Because he's had over a year and he has failed to deliver on that. But you continue. Sod your Anglo-futurism, boys and girls. The Prime Minister is offering the next generation opportunity to be driven from their overpriced flat by autonomous cars and the local tobacconists, only to discover that they can't buy anything once they get there. As a young voter, it's hardly filling me full of confidence for my future. This is why I love Will. Not only is he a, quote, young conservative, that I've said many, many times when we've covered his articles, he is generally having a midlife conservative crisis, and he's not even middle-aged yet, but there you go. At least ministers can be content in the knowledge that the media bill might ensure a sympathetic ear from one of the two papers if they fancy a post-election gig as a columnist. Number 10 would argue that the elections are not won or lost by a king or queen speeches, and that swing voters in Darlington or Derby are not going to vote for the Conservatives next year based on what was announced yesterday. All eyes now turn towards the upcoming autumn statement and next year's spring budget for the hope of some retail offer. Will we even get to a spring budget? I doubt it. And I would love to speak to Will. I really would. I doubt we would ever do it though. But I would love to speak to Will Atkinson. Just like politics and policies, and just try and get his general feeling on so many things. I think it would be kind of a fascinating conversation to have. But yeah, the autumn statement, given how fractured the Tory party is at the moment, what does that do if you've got a significant part of your party that votes against the budget? What does that say about your own party? And even worse, at the spring budget, if Sunak decides to just start giving away things, just go, well, we're just going to do whatever we possibly can at the spring budget to give away things. Yeah. That sounds an amazing idea, that will. But anyway, let's finish this off. So, yet putting one's faith for re-election on an economic recovery looks decidedly risky, as the Bank of England is warning about a looming recession now becomes increasingly gloomy. Yesterday was an opportunity to put out the flesh and bones of Sunak's promises of change. He has now ducked, and one does not need to look far ahead to see what could have been done had the ambition been there. Chances are he ain't going to do it, and of course, a lot of people are saying, what about all of these? None of the conservatives down below that are commenting on his article really agree with him either. But That's the Conservative view. Normally, around these things, you'd be getting at least like 2 or 3 mentioning things mentioned in the King's speech. No one else has really done an article besides Will. And as I said at the beginning, he's the guy, I think, on the lowest rung who just gets given, just go do this, whatever. Yeah, seems to be more and more of a yeah of the T boy, and of course having, as we said, having a bit of a midlife conservative crisis. Will, are you okay? Um, do you need to consider maybe the Labour Party as an actual option for a party that will deliver on its promises, or do you need to maybe do some soul searching and realize that maybe you're a liberal Democrat all along? Who knows? But as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link, Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club, all down below. Like I say, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the good stuff that helps out the channel as well. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.